everybody. Welcome to Resistance Live. It's the 11th of July, 2025. Oh my goodness. Okay, so there is some very good news this morning, and you all know that when I come on here, I'm usually trying to give you guys like at least some good news. There's actually some very, very, very good news this morning, which we have to start with, which is that Trump's polling numbers on immigration are in the toilet. There is some new breaking news this morning. There's actually like quite astounding from the standpoint of the demographic makeup of the United States. And we're going to get to that very soon in just a second. For those who are new here, I'm Elizabeth Cronise McLaughlin. I am a former Wall Street lawyer, lifetime activist. Currently, I am an impact consultant helping people figure out how they can make a really big difference in the current moment. Internationally recognized leadership expert. And of course, I've been the host of Resistance Live for the last 8.5 years. Today, for our visually challenged viewers, I'm wearing a black top with a black blazer. My hair is pulled back. I'm in front of my bookshelf and my yellow utility cart, and I'm coming to you from occupied Muncie, Lenape, and Mohican land. Okay, so here's the deal. New poll numbers dropped this morning, and 79% of the country, 79% of the country have and it's much higher if you're a Democrat, by the way, it's 91%, highest rates in history are now polling that they believe immigration is good for the country. Okay. This is actually like a huge thing. His numbers, like of approval ratings on his immigration policy right now are like sitting down 35%. 65% of the country believes that everything that he's doing with immigration is horrible. And in fact, the whole perspective on what immigration does for this country is changing in very real time. I personally think that this is kind of like a very big deal, in part because what we're seeing now is a real shift in viewpoint about what immigration means in America, okay? And the other thing that we're seeing is that even folks who voted for him are wildly opposed to this set of policies. Like truly, we're now at only a third of the country believing that mass deportation is a good idea. And we have 79% of the country saying that immigration is good for America, this is really kind of astonishing. Now, we have to put this on top of events like what happened yesterday in Camarillo, California. Okay, so if you don't know, here's what happened yesterday. Farm in Camarillo. Enroll 20 military vehicles and like hundreds of ICE agents in full riot gear to a farm, okay? They swarm down and they start detaining people. And there are reports from people who were there that after the people were detained, they could hear them being beaten, okay, by ICE with batons. Really ugly, bad stuff. There's video of children crying as their parents were taken away. There was an immediate community response to this, where within a matter of minutes, there were dozens of people from the community at the farm standing in the way of ICE being allowed to depart. And over time, through the evening, those numbers grew. Now, somehow the people who were on rapid response knew that the warrant that ICE was operating under expired at 10 o'clock. And if they could keep ICE from leaving, right, and getting access to people who had been on the farm, like leaving with people and getting access to people who had been on the farm until 10 o'clock, they no longer had jurisdiction. And so this community held together and stopped ICE from taking more people than they otherwise would have taken by standing in the way of what they were trying to do, not allowing vehicles to leave, okay? Very big deal. And, then there were tear gas thrown at the people that were there. They were threatening them. They were walking around with machine guns. And this is a small town in the Central Valley of California. This is not a huge location. It is a place that depends on agriculture for its very survival. Okay, but it was really quite an insane situation. And if you haven't seen the footage, I've reposted some of it on Blue Sky. One of the things that I want people to be aware of right now, because I was asked a question about this morning on the Patreon feed. And reminder, you can become a paid subscriber for as little as $5 a month if you want to ask me questions and have me answer them. One of the things that we have to be aware of right now is that this kind of immediate defense, Carpinteria right next to Santa Barbara, you're correct, not the Central Valley. I've driven through it. One of the things that I want people to be aware of right now is it's this kind of community response that is currently pushing back. This mirrors exactly what we saw in LA a couple of days ago, where already organized community members cleared MacArthur Park when ICE rolled in with all of those tanks. So for people who are saying to me, like, I don't know what else I can do here, well, this is the answer, okay? You've got to get in community with people who are already doing immigration defense work where you live. And this is not hard at this point. You find the local immigration rights organization, you find your local faith leadership that are doing this work, you find other organizations that are coming together as ICE defense networks. Some of these are being built at a very organic level, even on places like next door that are kind of known for being fairly racist. People are pulling together these defense networks. And the benefit of doing this before it happens, before there's an ICE raid, is that when ICE arrives, you've already got like a phone tree and a list of people that you can contact to show up like that, okay? Just this morning, I heard stories about people who have set up ICE defense networks in a town, I'm not going to tell you where literally there's a camp pickup where it's known that a lot of Latino parents are sending their kids for camp. And that camp picks up at the same spot every morning, Monday through Friday. You know what they've done in this community? They've set up people on roofs with binoculars for like an hour before this happens and an hour after, so that they can warn people if they see ICE coming. And again, this is really straightforward community defense work, all right? And it's something that like any one of us can do. I'm going to remind you that this is what the Black Panther Party did in their own defense work, because they were being terrorized by police. Okay, so there are models for this happening in the past that need to be applied in the current moment. Okay, and these are things you can organize with your neighbors, right? If you've got neighbors who are concerned about protecting other neighbors from ICE, you can set this up where you live, right? They're not going to like it very much, but you can set it up, right? I mean, okay, so let me tell you something else. There was a breaking news story out of Wired yesterday that with this expanded new murder budget funding, ICE has all sorts of plans for folks and who they plan to arrest and detain. For instance, they're now going to target people on skateboards because they think people on skateboards are looking for objects to throw at ICE. They're going to detain people who are out there making anti-ICE commentary. Whoopsie doodle. They're going to target people who are reposting ICE videos of ICE beating and kidnapping people off the street. I don't know how they're exactly going to figure that out because things spread like wildfire. They're going to arrest people for trying to live stream ICE kidnapping and blackbagging people off the street. These are the things that they're threatening. Now, let me just say something about this, all right? Yes, there is a First Amendment in this United States of America still, okay? They're not allowed to arrest U.S. citizens for using our voices. They're not allowed to do it. They may try. In fact, they've already tried. You know, they arrested a grandmother in San Diego this week for just simply standing in a hallway outside of an immigration courtroom taking some video. They may try it, okay? But what they're doing with this kind of like, boom, boom, here's what's coming, is they're trying to shut people up. They're trying to say to people, if you speak out against us, if you record what we're doing, if you share the terrorizing that we're doing of other human beings, you're next. That's the messaging of this. And this is the messaging of fascism, right? It's like comply or die. That's essentially what the messaging is, okay? And our job, okay, I had a long conversation yesterday with somebody about fear. Oh my God. So our job is to make sure that we are managing our fear in such a way that we do not capitulate. Okay. That little story from yesterday, which I hadn't planned on telling, but I'll just tell you. I was having a conversation yesterday with a friend of mine who's a therapist. She works with a lot of different people, including like, you know, folks who are front and center activists and people who are marginalized and vulnerable right now. And she said to me, you know, like everybody's afraid right now. We're all walking around with like lesser or greater degrees of fear, depending on where we are, right? Depending on like our identity, depending on how much in the spotlight we are, depending on whether or not we've got a target on our back because we're immigrants or trans or simply have brown skin, you know, what that might mean, okay? We're all walking around with some degree of fear. And she said, you know, the key to this moment for everybody who cares is that we have to manage that fear and not allow it to stop us from fighting back, right? That doesn't mean you do irrational things. If, for instance, you're someone who's undocumented, you're not going to walk right into a checkpoint, right? But one of the things that she did say was we have to think about people like Navalny. Like, it's not like Navalny wasn't terrified. It's not like Navalny didn't know that there was a strong likelihood that Putin was going to try to kill him again, right? It's not like his family didn't know that. It's not like his wife didn't know that. But they decided together that the cause of justice that they were fighting for was more significant than their fear, okay? Now, that's not to say that fear isn't like a teacher, that it's not something that you need to pay attention to, that you can ignore your fear. But having to manage the means by which we handle our own fear so that we can still continue taking action is really important, right? Like super important, because they are going to threaten everybody. Like they already are. They're going to say, like, you talk about us, we're going to arrest you. They're going to say that. And, the question that we all have to assess based on our own risk assessments is, like, how likely is that actually going to happen? How likely is it that they will do something like that? And am I willing to let other people die because they're threatening me? Again, we have things we have to think about here in the consideration of this. But I will tell you that I feel like that messaging is designed to try to shut people up because they do not have the manpower to arrest everyone, right? And if 79% of the country is in favor of immigration and 65% of the country despises what Trump is doing on immigration, they would essentially have to arrest all of us in order to do what they're saying they're going to do. So we have to be rational about the response to this, right? We have to be rational about it. Okay. We got other things we have to talk about today. There's an ongoing hearing that just ended today about Kilmar Abrego Garcia. This is the second day of hearings on this in front of Judge Zinnes. And this basically concerns whether or not Kilmar Abrego Garcia is going to be returned to Baltimore, okay, when he's released, and whether or not the government is going to try to deport him again. And Judge Zinnes is going, we now know, because this just wound down a little while ago, she is going to issue some kind of an order to try to protect Kilmar Abrego Garcia from being rendered to another third-party country without due process. This hearing, if I was a DOJ lawyer right now, I'd be mortified. Judge Zinnes is so fed up with their runaround nonsense, not answering questions. They didn't put on a prepared witness yesterday, trying to manipulate the truth, ignoring the court's orders. Like, she's done. Like, literally to the point where she said to the attorneys from the DOJ at one point in this, you said you were going to do this before and you violated the order. So basically, I have no reason to believe you're telling me the truth now. And that's true. It's all true. But the good news about this is there appears to be at least a modicum of a possibility that Kilmar Abrego Garcia will finally be home in Baltimore in the near future, which would be great. And that doesn't mean he's not going to be facing these trumped up criminal charges that they manufactured against him in Tennessee. And it doesn't mean that they might not try to pick him up again and deport him for some manufactured reason. But the court order will be in place. It says no deportation for 72 hours, can't deport him without previous approval of the court. And if you try to deport him, you have to give him an opportunity to meet with his lawyers. We'll see what this order looks like. But Judge Zinnes was not messing around. Very unhappy with the DOJ, and it was a good thing to see. So we'll see what happens with that next. Okay. I was asked to talk about this new lawsuit that has been filed in Los Angeles that is seeking a class certification mechanism to issue a nationwide injunction against the actions of the Department of Homeland Security and ICE in LA and elsewhere. Okay. This is a really interesting case. This is one of those cases where, like, I read the complaint this morning. This is one of those cases that gets me, like, really jazzed up. So you all know I spent a huge chunk of time when I was a lawyer doing class action work that was human rights class action work. And this case is that. And it's very interesting. We spent some time, I think it was yesterday, talking about class actions and how they work and how you have to show common questions of law and fact, and you have to show those questions predominate. And, those things class definitions have to be really kind of finely tuned, or you can't get the class certified. So this case has two classes in it. Really interesting. It has a class for people who have been suspiciously stopped, which is basically racial profiling. ICE is walking around LA, says, "You're brown. I bet you're not a citizen. Show me your papers." That's one class, okay? People who have been racially profiled and stopped by ICE. And then there is a second class of people who have been taken under warrantless arrest, where ICE has basically said, "We've got you. We're going to stick you in the basement of the LA County Jail with no access to lawyers or anything else. And we're going to keep you there for days when that's supposed to be a temporary holding facility. And we're going to violate your rights while we do it." In addition, some of the class plaintiffs are organizations like CHRLA, like the United Farm Workers, because their members have been snatched under this, like other organizations that work directly with immigrant labor, okay, and immigrants generally. They are alleging violations of the Fourth Amendment, which protects you from unlawful searches and seizure. I mean, you can't be arrested for no reason. You can't be searched for no reason. You certainly can't be searched on the basis of your ethnicity. Fifth Amendment, for a variety of reasons: denial of counsel, violation of civil rights. They're claiming that folks were held in deplorable conditions: no food, no water, darkness, no access to any medicine when they needed it. That's also in there. And then fundamentally also they're making allegations that violate the 4th and 5th Amendment with regard to the way in which ICE is targeting people purely on the basis of how they look, okay? This is really straightforward, but it's also a really exciting case because if the classes are certified both for a suspicious stop and for warrantless arrests, and the certification allows this court to set an injunction nationwide, that injunction will stop ICE in its tracks. You can tell why I'm excited about this case, right? It has huge potential, like huge potential. It's a really well-written complaint also. And it details, they have, of course, named class representative plaintiffs in there. It details the things that happened to them. Like somebody's walking out of a laundromat and ICE is like, we got you, snatched, no warrant, no reason to claim that like they've got a criminal record or anything. They just pull them in. Other plaintiffs who were like shoved against fences and it was demanded that they prove that they were U.S. citizens. There's multiple of those and they are U.S. citizens, right? Again, documented claims in this complaint that would apply to anybody in this situation. So this is a case that is like one to watch, no question. And, you know, the question now, it does seek injunctive relief. It is not seeking damages, which means that it falls under Rule 23B2 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, which has a slightly easier means of certifying a class than if you're seeking damages themselves, okay? Which is good. And they're seeking injunctive relief nationwide. So I don't know how fast this one's going to move. It could move very quickly, depending on what the judge decides to do with it. But this is something that could truly alter the landscape. And then we would have to see what happens if ICE decides to violate it, because you all know they're going to try. But I think that's something to be like very excited about this morning. Okay. Last thing on immigration, and then we have to talk about one other issue. Okay, so I was asked this morning to talk about how to combat propaganda about immigrants. And essentially, you know, this is the line, the false line that says, well, these people are criminals because they came into the country illegally, right? Or if you don't have papers, you don't deserve to be here, right? If you haven't followed the rules, you don't deserve to be here. Okay, so let me just say a couple of things about this, all right? People are allowed to come, one of many things I'm going to say. People are allowed to come to the United States seeking asylum. If they are fleeing violence, if they are fleeing threats of gang rape, if they are fleeing threats of persecution because they are LGBT or because they're a woman or because they've suffered domestic violence, they are allowed to seek asylum in the United States. That's legal. Like, it's legal to cross the border and say, I'm seeking asylum. Totally legal, okay? If somebody is here and has pursued everything legally, the Trump administration is doing this thing, which we talked about yesterday, which is they're calling them in front of immigration judges who work for the administration, right? They've now empowered the National Guard to do this. And those people are dismissing the claims, the lawfully box-checked claims of people seeking citizenship. And that renders them stateless and it renders them undocumented. And the minute they walk out of the courtroom, they're being picked up by ICE. So people are doing everything right and are still being detained and deported, okay? The last point I want to make about this, because I think it's really important to just like, well, actually, there's two more points. The other thing I want to mention is that being in the United States undocumented is not a crime. A lot of people don't understand this. Being in the United States on undocumented status is a civil violation. It is not a crime. It is not a crime to be an undocumented person inside the United States. So the idea, which has taken hold, and the propaganda that has been spewed by the far right, that like if you're here illegally, nobody's illegal. If you're here and you are not documented, that you are somehow committing a crime is false. That is a lie. It is probably the lie that has taken root more easily than any other one about this. All right. It is not a crime. It's a civil violation, right? Like jaywalking, like a parking ticket. That's what it is. Okay. People are not criminals if they're in the United States without papers. All right. This one is a really big one that we've got to kind of like get past. All right. Final thing that I just want to say here, okay? And I have to talk about this just like, I mean, I feel like I could talk for hours about this. People should really go read Isabel Wilkerson's book, Cast, if you have not read it yet, because a lot of it is about the history of immigration into the United States. Okay, so my great-grandmother got on a boat when she was 14 years old from Poland and came to the United States through New York Harbor into Ellis Island. 14 years old, alone, okay? And she was held in detention there, quarantined for like 60 days before she was released, and managed finally to make her way to my uncle, her uncle rather, who was in Philadelphia. And then she started cleaning houses. Okay. That's like the immigration story on my maternal side of the family. Okay. There is like a moral imperative to understand that people have freedom of movement. All right. And that it is only because we have these ideas about whiteness and white supremacy and entitlement in a country that we stole. Let's just be honest about that, right? We're all living on stolen land, the country that we stole, that we have decided now arbitrarily that certain people are worthy and certain people aren't. Okay. When my great grandmother came to this country, there was no like requirement that she show that she could contribute in some valuable way to society, right? There was no demand that like she show up and immediately take an oath to the United States of America. She got on a boat. The boat landed. She got off it and she went to work because her parents actually wanted her to have a better life. From a tiny town in Poland where they had nothing, where people were starving, right? They saved up their money and they stuck her on a boat so that she could have a better life. The thing I want people to understand is that like immigration is a part of the fabric of America. Like enslaved people and immigrants and the indigenous people who were enslaved by the people who took this place over are what built this country. They built this country. Like all of us are descended from immigrants if we weren't brought here against our will as enslaved people. All of us, or we weren't born here. We have such twisted ideas about immigration in this country. Like, I mean, honestly, the way the propaganda has taken hold is really hard for me to swallow on most days. And if you encounter someone who claims that there is something illegal or criminal about trying to seek a better life in this country, you know, which like has more money than like any other country on earth, save like maybe Monaco, which is like the size of a quarter. Seriously, there's something wrong with your moral compass. People deserve freedom of movement. They deserve to move from one place to another to seek a better life for themselves and their children. That's like, by the way, in the UN Charter of Human Rights. So this claim that people are illegal, therefore they deserve to be sent to countries that they weren't even born in, where they don't speak the language and they're going to be tortured or turned into slaves, is an abominable line of thinking. Now, if you're going to handle it in a different way than the way I just did, which is like outrage, the thing that I would ask you to ask someone who comes to you with this line of thinking is, I'm curious, where do your ancestors come from? And then have a conversation about that. How did they come to this country? What did they come here for? Where did they land when they arrived? That is an opening to start having conversations about the nature of the importance of immigration to the entirety of US history and the US economy, okay? And starting to have conversations in that direction can start to create cognitive dissonance. Now, I have to admit, as I've said many times here before, this is not my strong suit. I get really fed up with this nonsense. My view on it is like, wake the fuck up, right? Which is not effective deep canvassing. It's not effective strategy when you're trying to win people over, okay? But it is really critically important to know the facts and then also to ask people why they think that. It's really interesting that you think the people who are here who are undocumented are criminals. Did you know that it's really only a civil violation like a parking ticket? Where'd you get the information that like, where'd you hear that? Where'd you hear that they're criminals? Who told you that? Ask questions that get people thinking, right? And then like move in that direction, okay? And again, there's so much work to be done on this front. There are people who are ready to do this work. Therapists are really good at this work, by the way, at shutting down like this kind of nonsense in ways that are much more effective than my version of it, which is always like, oh my God, right? But if you're the oh my God person, that you may not be the person to handle these kind of conversations, okay? So that's my best advice on that. All right. If you like what you see here, please subscribe to this channel. This afternoon for our Patreon only subscribers, there is a bonus broadcast at 3:30 p.m. You can join us for that by joining patreon.com/resistancelive for as little as $5 a month. And we'll be talking about all sorts of things on that broadcast, both political and otherwise. It is an Ask Me Anything broadcast with a few boundaries around it. Also, please don't forget to like this broadcast, drop me a comment if you're watching on the replay. And I want to remind you all that we are running our program, the Dual Power Accelerator, which trains you how to build safety and security and alternative systems of support where you live. Class for our third cohort starts a week from today. The link to join that is already below in the show notes. please sign up for it if you haven't already. Scholarship applications for that close on Monday at noon Eastern. So if you are in need of a scholarship, please fill out the application today or over the weekend. We don't have very many left. I'm just warning you all, but please feel free to apply full or partial. And we are closing registration for this at 9 a.m. a week from today, 9 a.m. Eastern a week from today, because class starts that afternoon. So time to get in now if you're not in already. We would love to see you on the inside. And I will be here for our Patreon subscribers later on this afternoon, and I will see the rest of you back here live on Tuesday. We have an educational video dropping on Monday called Worried About Democracy, Here's How to Cope. That one will be fun. So you can see that on Monday on our sister channel for the Ripple Effect Institute. And other than that, I hope you all have a relaxing weekend. Please do some good work this weekend in your own community. Donate to a food bank. Get out and help pick up some garbage. Talk to your neighbors, okay? Do some volunteer work. We all need community more now than ever. All right, my friends, I'll see you soon. Bye.